Lucy and Tom were running from the rain when they turned onto an old path inside the forest. The sky had turned gray, the wind was getting stronger, and the branches were hitting each other. Their phones had no signal. As the road went on, the rain became heavier. Their clothes were soaked, their shoes were full of water, and they kept walking through the mud. They could barely see ahead when they noticed an old cabin between the trees. Moss hung from the roof. The windows were dark and silent. They had no other option, so they went toward the cabin. The door opened with a creak. Inside was dim, but at least it was dry. The air smelled like dust, damp wood, and rot. Lucy and Tom shook the water from their clothes and stepped inside. There was a large table, a broken chair, an old stove, and framed photographs hanging on the walls. At first, they didn't pay attention. They only wanted to sit down and rest. But after a while, the photographs on the walls caught their attention. Every photo showed different people. Some were alone, some were in pairs or small groups. All of them seemed to be taken either in the forest or near the cabin. Their faces looked tense, frozen, and frightened. Some of the photos looked old, but others were recent. All the frames were the same. It looked organized and deliberate. Lucy and Tom noticed there were many photos. It felt like people had been coming here for years. When they looked at the last photo, both of them froze. They were in the picture. They were wearing the same wet clothes they had on right now. They were standing with the same frightened expressions. The picture looked like it had been taken from somewhere outside the cabin. It had to have been taken very recently. The colors were fresh. The frame looked clean. A cold fear spread through both of them. Lucy tried to control her breathing, while Tom went to the door. When he opened it, the rain was still falling. Right outside the door, there were fresh footprints in the mud. The prints were deep and clear. After a few steps, they disappeared around the back of the cabin. Someone had been there very recently, and there was more than one person. They went back inside. The cabin was fuller than it first appeared. On the shelves were rusty tools, old knives, thick ropes, and wooden boards carved with strange symbols. On the table were melted candle stubs, blackened wicks, and dark brown stains. There were similar stains between the floorboards. Lucy and Tom realized this was not an ordinary hunting cabin. In one corner was a newer-looking rug. It didn't match the rest of the old interior. When Tom lifted the rug, a wooden trapdoor appeared. There was a metal ring on it. The rug had been placed carefully, so it wouldn't leave a mark. That meant it was used often. Beneath the trapdoor was a stone staircase leading down. A damp smell rose from below. It smelled like earth, mold, and old smoke. Lucy and Tom understood the danger immediately. Even staying inside the cabin felt unsafe. But running outside also meant facing whoever was out there. They tried to stay quiet. After a while, they heard faint sounds outside. Footsteps in the wet ground, branches breaking, slow and deliberate movement. Soon the sounds stopped near the cabin. The door did not open, but it felt like someone was standing there. After a long silence, the footsteps slowly moved away, but that didn't mean the danger was gone. Lucy and Tom covered the trapdoor again and replaced the rug. They looked again at the photographs. On the back of some frames, there were dates. Many of them were recent. Some were very old. None of the people in the photos were smiling. All had the same frightened look, the same feeling of being trapped. They found an old notebook on a shelf. The pages were yellow and burned at the edges. Inside were handwritten notes and drawings. Names and dates were listed. Some names were crossed out. Some had symbols drawn beside them. It looked like a record book. From the notes, they understood the truth. The cabin owner was part of a cult. This cult lived hidden in the forest, far from society. For years, they had watched people passing through. Anyone who entered the cabin was taken below through the hidden passage. In a large underground chamber, they were sacrificed as part of a ritual. A photo was taken of each victim. Their picture was added to the wall. Their name was written in the notebook. Lucy and Tom already had a photo on the wall. That meant they had already been chosen. Time passed. The rain didn't stop. Night fell, and the cabin grew darker. Soon they saw flickering lights through the window, flashlight beams. Then more lights appeared. Footsteps approached. They heard faint whispers. Lucy and Tom realized that if they stayed, they would never get out. At the back of the cabin was a small, fragile window. Tom forced it open. They carefully slipped outside. The forest was dark. Only the moving lights of the flashlights could be seen. They crawled to stay low. The ground was slippery. Branches tore their clothes. Mud covered their legs. Then the cabin door opened. Heavy footsteps spread across the area. People were moving not only in front of the cabin, but behind it too. They had surrounded the forest. It felt like a trap. Lucy and Tom hid behind a thick tree. They tried not to breathe, but the footprints they left in the mud exposed them. One of the lights drew closer. Footsteps slowed. The beam of light hit the tree trunk. Lucy and Tom started running, but it didn't last long. They hadn't seen the traps. A thin wire caught Tom's leg. He fell hard. His knee bled. Lucy tried to help him up. The footsteps behind them sped up. Several hooded figures emerged from the darkness. Their faces were hidden, but their cloaks made everything clear. Lucy and Tom were captured. Their hands were tied. Their eyes were covered. They were carried back to the cabin. The trapdoor opened. They were taken down the stone stairs. Beneath the cabin was a large underground chamber. The walls were stone. In the center of the floor was a large carved symbol. Candles burned around it. Water dripped from the ceiling. Rusty chains hung from the walls. Old wooden tables stood nearby. In the corners were piles of personal belongings. Bags, shoes, broken phones, torn clothes. Some were very old, dusty, moldy, abandoned. None of the owners had returned. The cult members stood silently around the room. Everything was organized. Everything was practiced. Lucy and Tom were placed in the center. There was nowhere to run. On the wall was a row of empty frames. Those frames were for their photographs. Behind the main chamber was a smaller room. Its walls were covered in strange carvings. The floor was stained darker than the rest. The smell was strong. It had seeped into the stone. The preparations finished. The candles flickered. The ritual followed its usual pattern. This was just another night for the cult. The forest kept its secrets. The missing were forgotten. Over time, rain washed away the traces. The cabin stayed silent. Soon after, Lucy and Tom's pictures were added to the wall upstairs. Their names were written into the notebook. A small symbol marked the ritual as complete. The candles were extinguished. The stairway was sealed. The rug was laid back in place. The cabin returned to its quiet state. Outside, the rain weakened. The wind slowed. The forest went back to stillness. The next day, someone walked past the cabin but didn't go inside. The old door and dark windows were enough to keep them away. Time passed. Another storm came. More people wandered into the forest. Some got lost. Some searched for shelter. The cabin remained there among the trees, silent, waiting, its walls lined with photographs. And at the end of the row were the faces of Lucy and Tom. The story ends here. If you're hearing this, it means you've made it to the end of the video. Congratulations, and welcome to the family. Sleep well, and have good nightmares.